Close your eyes and try to imagine this. You are locked in a confined, windowless space for over a year. There is no exit, no plan B, no expiration date on your calendar. But you aren't alone. Around you, there isn't a single human soul. Instead, you are surrounded by thousands of animals. Some are gentle, docile creatures. Others are apex predators, killers by nature. There are tiny, fragile species prone to instant panic. And then there are the giants, beasts so massive that a single misplaced step or a sudden jolt could bring the entire structure crashing down. The environment is oppressive. It is damp, sweltering, and suffocating. As the days bleed into weeks, the air begins to change. It grows heavy, thick with the rising concentration of carbon dioxide and the stench of accumulated waste. And the noise? The noise never stops. There is no such thing as a quiet night. There is no peaceful morning. There is only a relentless, bone-shaking cacophony of roars, bleats, and scratching that continues for 370 consecutive days. In the middle of this living chaos, there are only 8 people. 8 human beings responsible for ensuring this entire ecosystem doesn't self-destruct. They didn't have to manage it for a few hours or a few days. They did it for over a year, without a break, without a shift change, and without a way out. When people talk about this ship, the question is usually, could a boat like that actually float? But the real question, the one that actually matters, is this. How does a closed-loop system, teeming with biological risk and psychological pressure, avoid collapsing from the inside out? How did they survive the impossible? The extreme environment, the silent killers. Air, the invisible executioner. In a sealed environment, air isn't a given. It isn't something that just exists forever. Every breath taken by those thousands of animals is a chemical exchange that alters the very atmosphere of the ship. Oxygen levels slowly plummet. Carbon dioxide climbs. Humidity spikes. The temperature rises. And the most terrifying part? You don't notice it immediately. There are no sirens. There are no flashing red lights. The warning signs are subtle, almost peaceful. The animals become lethargic. They stop eating. Their reflexes dull. Their immune systems begin to flicker out. If the air isn't managed with surgical precision, death doesn't come with a bang. It arrives as a silent, creeping shadow that spreads until it becomes irreversible. The fire hazard, a powder keg of biology. Most people think of fire as something caused by a match or a short circuit. But inside a ship filled with thousands of living beings, the danger is biological. As waste accumulates and heat rises, the ship becomes a giant chemical reactor. It produces methane, highly flammable; ammonia, toxic and corrosive; volatile organic compounds. In a cramped, high-temperature space, you don't need a massive explosion to end the mission. You only need one pocket of trapped gas and one tiny spark, perhaps a static discharge or a friction-heated joint, to ignite a catastrophe. In this world, the greatest threat isn't the storm outside. It's the chemistry being manufactured every second on the inside. Animal behavior, the living psychological bomb. Animals were never meant to live in prolonged captivity, especially not in the belly of a ship. Under these conditions, instincts go haywire. Predators become hyper-irritable. Prey species spiral into chronic panic. Territorial animals grow violently aggressive. Sensitive species succumb to extreme, often fatal, stress. Now, imagine the chain reaction. One animal panics in a small stall. It thrashes, it screams, it slams against the wood. That sound vibrates into the next compartment. Another animal reacts, then another. Within minutes, an entire deck can descend into total, unmanageable hysteria. And if that happens, there is no backup. There is no riot squad. There are only 8 people standing between order and a stampede of thousands of terrified creatures. Noise, the endless torture. We often underestimate noise, treating it as a mere nuisance. But in a closed environment, sound doesn't disappear. It echoes. It builds. It repeats. Thousands of animals, braying, growling, hissing, scratching, and stomping. There is no mute button. There is no off switch. It is a 24/7 assault on the senses for over 365 days. For the human crew, this isn't just annoying, it's psychological warfare. It leads to chronic sleep deprivation, neurological strain, a total breakdown of focus, increased irritability and emotional volatility. In an environment this fragile, an emotional breakdown leads to mistakes. And here, a small mistake equals a fatal consequence. Waste, the accumulating biohazard. Every living thing produces waste. Now, multiply that by thousands. Manure, urine, bacteria, and parasites. If left unchecked for even a few days, the environment becomes uninhabitable. The air turns toxic. Diseases leap across species. Infections become rampant. The horror isn't found in a single massive failure. It's found in the small delays, the chores skipped, the drains clogged, the tiny oversights that compound day after day until the system reaches its breaking point. The blueprint for survival. How did 8 people survive this? They didn't rely on brute strength, and they certainly didn't rely on luck. They relied on a system, turning chaos into structure. The space couldn't be open. It had to be compartmentalized. Species were isolated. Unnecessary contact was eliminated. Movement was strictly regulated. The logic was simple. Minimized interaction equals minimized conflict. Efficiency through stillness. They practiced a survival strategy, reduced movement. Less movement means less energy expended. Less energy means less food required. Less food means less waste produced. Less waste means less risk. This wasn't cruelty. It was a masterclass in biological logistics. Engineering with nature, not against it. 8 people cannot clean a ship of that size by hand. They had to use the laws of physics. Gravity, using sloped floors. Ship motion, letting the pitch and roll of the waves assist in drainage. What humans couldn't do with muscle, they did with intelligent design. The power of routine. In the Ark, there was no room for inspiration or feeling like it. Every day was a relentless loop. Feed, inspect, clean, observe, repeat, repeat, repeat. The goal wasn't to excel, it was to maintain. Consistency was their only shield against the entropy of the ship. The internal order. In this pressure cooker, the most dangerous animal wasn't the lion or the bear. It was a human who had lost control. To prevent a psychological collapse, they maintained a rigid social order. Roles were absolute. Responsibilities were specific. Authority was unquestioned. Without internal discipline, the ship would have rotted from the inside long before the water ever receded. Lessons. The architecture of trust. The story of Noah's Ark is often told as a miracle of the sea. But in reality, it was a marathon of obedience. It wasn't a one-day event. It was a grueling, year-long process of maintaining faith when the world outside had already ceased to exist. Faith is not a feeling. It's persistence. Most people define faith as a warm glow, a sense of peace or comfort. But inside that ship, there was nothing comfortable. There was the stench. There was the deafening noise. There was physical exhaustion and the numbing weight of repetition. True faith is this: continuing to do the right thing when you feel absolutely nothing. It is the grit to keep cleaning, keep feeding, and keep standing when the feeling of God's presence is replaced by the reality of hard labor. Obedience over understanding. Noah and his family didn't have a GPS. They didn't have a weather forecast. They didn't know when the rain would stop. They didn't know when the mountains would appear. They didn't know how long their supplies would truly last. But they knew one thing: who closed the door. If God was the one who started the journey, they had to trust He was the one who would end it. You don't need to see the destination to stay on the path. You only need to trust the navigator. The test of time versus the test of circumstance. Crisis rarely kills a person's spirit instantly. It's the duration of the crisis that erodes the soul. You can survive one day of hardship. You can hold on to hope for a week. But a year, without a single sign of change? This is where the casual believers fall away, and the true faithful are forged. The ark wasn't just saving their lives, it was testing their endurance. God isn't just saving you, He's preparing you. The ark wasn't just a lifeboat, it was a training ground. It was a school of discipline, patience, and absolute reliance. If they had been saved without being changed, they would have been unfit to rebuild the world. The struggle wasn't an obstacle to their future. It was the requirement for it. The open door isn't always the right time. When the water began to recede, the temptation to bolt for the exit must have been overwhelming. But Noah didn't rush. He waited. He observed. He sent out the birds. He checked the ground. Faith isn't just believing God will open the door. It's having the wisdom to know when to walk through it. Practical lessons. A survival model for life and business. You don't have to be a person of faith to recognize that this story provides an incredibly realistic model for modern survival. 1. Systems trump effort. If those 8 people had relied on trying their best every day, they would have burnt out in 3 weeks.
It is beautiful.
They didn't live by inspiration.
A new world awaits
They lived
us.
by systems. Standardized chores, clear protocols, minimized decision-making. In your business or your health, motivation is a flickering flame. Systems are the engine. What keeps you alive long-term isn't your hustle. It's the structure you build. The small things are the real killers. The ark wouldn't have sunk because of a giant wave. It would have collapsed because of a clogged drain or a small patch of mold.
Kiểm soát cảm xúc không phải kỹ
In
năng
life,
mềm xa xỉ,
Small debts lead to
mà là điều
bankruptcy.
kiện để cả hệ thống không phát
In
nổ.
health, tiny habits lead to chronic disease. In relationships, small, ignored conflicts lead to divorce. Don't watch the horizon for monsters. Watch your feet for the cracks. Environment dictates behavior. The animals didn't become evil. They were simply responding to a forced environment. Humans are the same. If you live in a chaotic, unstructured, and toxic environment, you will eventually become impulsive, angry, and unfocused. If you want to change yourself, you must first change the architecture of your surroundings. 4. Emotional intelligence is a survival skill. In a locked room, one person losing their temper can cause a chain reaction of disaster. In modern life, one impulsive email, one heated argument, or one emotional decision can destroy years of work or a lifetime of reputation. Emotional control isn't a soft skill. It is a survival requirement. Knowing when to wait. When the ship stopped, they didn't jump. They waited for the ground to be ready. In your career or investments, not every opportunity is the right opportunity. Knowing how to wait in the silence is just as important as knowing how to move in the storm. The climax. Who are you after the flood? Noah's Ark was never just a wooden structure. It was a crucible. It was a psychological laboratory. It was a school of discipline. They didn't survive because they were lucky. They survived because of order, discipline, perseverance, and unwavering belief. But perhaps the most important question isn't how they survived the ship. The real question is, who did they become after they stepped out? A new world cannot be built by old people. It requires a new kind of human, someone who has endured the darkness, mastered the discipline of the routine, understood the value of order, and learned how to start from zero.
Single file now.
Maybe what you are going through today feels exactly like that arc. No exit, no certainty, no comfort. But if you don't give up, if you maintain your internal order, if you keep moving forward one day at a time, you aren't just surviving. You are being prepared for a beginning far greater than anything you can currently imagine. The flood eventually dries up. The door eventually opens. Make sure that when it does, you are ready to build.